The thing Simone would remember was not the word. It was how calm his voice was when he said it. She was standing on the wrong side of a marble column on the rooftop of the Hale and Crest Tower, a glass of sparkling water warming in her hand, when she heard her husband describe her to 3 people she had never met. The party was the company's 10th anniversary. The whole city of New York spread out behind the glass walls, gold and white in the early dark. There were photographers near the entrance and a string quartet near the bar and a wall of white orchids that had cost more than her grandmother's first house. Simone had worn a deep blue gown that she had chosen herself, fitted close, with a high neck and clean lines. She had spent an hour on her hair, pressing each coil into place, and she had felt, when she left their apartment, almost beautiful. Almost was the word she lived in those days. Almost was a place Preston had built for her, one small comment at a time, over 6 years. The small comments had started early, so early that she had not recognized them as comments at all. In their first year together, Preston had told her she looked best in muted colors, that bright shades made her seem like she was trying too hard. She had stopped wearing the reds and greens her grandmother loved. He had told her, gently, that she should let the makeup artists do her face before any company event, because she did not quite know how to present herself for that world. She had let them. He had told her that her ideas were strongest when they stayed in the studio, that she was not built for the front of the room, that the front of the room was his job and the back of the room was hers, and that this was a partnership and not an insult. She had believed all of it. She had folded herself smaller and smaller, year by year, and called the folding love. She had stepped behind the column to take a breath. She had needed a minute away from the noise. That was the only reason she heard it. She is a good woman, Preston said, on the other side of the marble. His voice carried the easy warmth he used on investors. Smart. Loyal. But you have to understand the position I am in. This is a beauty company. People look at the man at the top and they look at the woman beside him, and they form an opinion about the brand in 2 seconds. I cannot have them forming the wrong one. A woman laughed lightly. Preston, that is a terrible thing to say. It is an honest thing to say, he answered. I did not build all of this to walk around with someone who is, let us be kind, plain. Forgettable. There is no shame in it. Some people are the product and some people are the back office. I married the back office. I am correcting the file. Simone did not move. She looked at her own reflection in the dark glass wall in front of her. She looked at the blue gown and the pressed hair and the woman inside both, holding very still. She did not cry. She did not step out from behind the column and make a scene. She set her glass down on the nearest tray, walked to the elevator, and went home alone. Preston did not notice she had left. He was the kind of man who did not notice a room until it stopped applauding him. She had married Preston Hale when she was 25 and he was 33. She had been a junior designer at a small studio his company acquired, and she had caught his attention not because of her face, he made that clear later, but because of her eye. She could look at a rack of 40 samples and pull the 3 that would sell. She could take a collection that felt dull and shift 2 colors and a hemline and make it sing. He had told her, in the beginning, that she saw things other people could not. She had believed that was love. She understood now that it had been inventory. For 6 years she had worked inside Hale and Crest without a title that matched what she did. She sat in the design meetings. She rebuilt the spring line the year it nearly failed. She chose the palette for the fragrance campaign that became the company's biggest seller. Preston stood in front of the cameras for all of it. He gave the interviews. He used the word "I" in every sentence. She had let him, because she loved him, and because he had taught her that her value was the work and not the credit. The divorce papers came 8 days after the rooftop party. He did not send them through a lawyer first. He brought them to the kitchen of their apartment himself, on a Sunday morning, and set them on the marble island next to her coffee. He was already dressed. He was always already dressed. I think we both know this has run its course, he said. Simone looked at the folder. She did not touch it. You could have called a lawyer, she said. I wanted to do this with respect. Is that what this is? Preston sighed, the way he sighed at meetings that ran too long. Simone. I am going to say something, and I need you to hear it as a fact and not an attack. You are not the kind of woman who belongs at the front of a company like this. You never were. I carried that for 6 years. I am done carrying it. I need someone the world looks at and wants. You are, and I am sorry to use the word, you are plain. You are ugly in the way that matters in my world. I cannot fix that and neither can you. She remembered the exact temperature of the room. She remembered the hum of the refrigerator. She remembered that her coffee was still too hot to drink. You built half of this company on my eye, she said. Her voice was steady. That surprised her. I built all of this company, Preston said, and you were a good assistant to it. There is a settlement in the folder. It is generous. My lawyer says it is more than generous. Take it, Simone. Do not make this ugly in another way. He left for the office 20 minutes later. He kissed the top of her head on the way out, the way you might pat a dog you were rehoming. Simone sat at the island for a long time. She did not open the folder. She thought about the rooftop, and the word plain, and the word ugly, and the calm in his voice. She thought about the spring line she had saved and the fragrance palette she had chosen and the 3 samples she could always pull from 40. She thought about her grandmother in Charlotte, who had taught her that fabric tells the truth even when people lie. Then she stood up, poured the cold coffee down the sink, and went to pack a bag. She did not pack much. She left the dresses Preston had bought her, the ones in bone and dove gray and the careful colors of money pretending to have taste. She left the jewelry. She took her clothes, the few pieces she had chosen for herself before he taught her not to. She took her sketchbooks, the old ones, the ones from before the marriage, when she still drew in color. And she took the cracked silver laptop from the bottom drawer of the office, the one Preston had replaced years ago and forgotten about, the one she had used at home in the early years when she did her best thinking after he had gone to bed. She did not fully know why she took it. She would understand later. She left the settlement folder on the marble island, unopened, exactly where he had put it. She did not know yet what she would become. She only knew, with a certainty that felt almost physical, that Preston Hale had just made the most expensive mistake of his life, and that he would not understand it until it was finished. The house on Marigold Street looked smaller than Simone remembered, the way every childhood house does. The porch sagged on the left. The screen door still stuck. The same azaleas Loretta had planted 30 years earlier crowded the front steps in a wall of deep pink. Loretta Reed opened the door before Simone could knock. She was 68 and stood straight as a measuring stick. She looked at her granddaughter standing on the porch with a single suitcase and a face that had been carefully arranged to look fine. He let you go, Loretta said. It was not a question. He left me, Simone said. He said I was ugly. Loretta did not gasp and she did not soften. She held the door open wider. Then he is a fool, and we already knew that. Come inside before the mosquitoes make a meal of you. The first week, Simone slept. She slept the way the body sleeps when it has been holding itself rigid for years. She slept 12 hours, then 14. Loretta let her. She left plates of food outside the bedroom door, grits and eggs in the morning, a covered dish at night, and she did not knock. On the 8th day, Loretta knocked. You have slept enough, she said. Get up. I need help with the Mercer wedding. Loretta had retired from professional sewing years before, but the women of the neighborhood still came to her for the things that mattered. A wedding dress. A christening gown. A funeral suit that had to fit a body changed by grief and time. She did the work at the old table in the back room, where the light came in clean and white through the tall windows, and where the walls were lined with spools in every color. Simone sat down at the table for the first time in years. The bride is built like a pear and she bought a dress made for a string bean, Loretta said. We are going to fix it. Pin where I tell you. For 3 hours they worked. Loretta talked and Simone pinned, and somewhere in the second hour Simone's hands remembered things her mind had buried. She saw, without trying, where the dress wanted to be taken in and where it wanted to be let out. She saw the line the fabric was asking for. She picked up the chalk and marked it before Loretta could, and Loretta watched her do it and said nothing, but her mouth twitched at the corner. You forgot you could do that, Loretta said. I didn't forget, Simone said. He told me it didn't count. And you believed him. Simone looked at the chalk line on the white fabric. For a while. They worked through the rest of the afternoon. Loretta showed her the dress for a christening she was finishing for a family across the street, the tiny seams done by hand because no machine could do them the way they deserved to be done. She showed Simone a suit she was letting out for a woman who had buried her husband in the spring and could no longer fit the clothes from her old life. Each piece had a story. Each one was a person. Loretta had spent 50 years making people fit back into their own lives, one stitch at a time, and she did it without ever once asking for her name to be on a label. You see this, Loretta said, holding up the widow's suit. Nobody is ever going to write about this in a magazine. Nobody is going to put my name on it. But that woman is going to stand at her sister's table next week and feel like herself for the first time since March, because of these seams. That is the work. The work is the thing. The name is just what fools chase when they cannot do the work. Simone thought about Preston, who had chased the name his whole life because he could not do the work, and who had married the work and called it the back office. You forgot you could do that, Loretta said again, quieter this time, watching her granddaughter's hands. Loretta sat down across the table. She had a way of looking at a person that felt like being measured for something. Let me tell you about your grandfather, she said. When we got married, I sewed every stitch of my own dress because we could not afford to buy one. People in this town said I was foolish. They said a woman who made her own wedding dress was telling everybody she had no one to provide for her. You know what I told them? What? I told them I would rather make a thing with my own hands than wait my whole life for a man to hand me something second-hand and call it a gift. Loretta tapped the table. That man you married handed you a small life and told you to be grateful for it. You were too young and too in love to see the size of what you were settling for. You are not too young now. Simone was quiet for a moment. I don't know how to start over. I gave him 6 years. I gave him my best ideas. I let him put his name on all of it. Then take it back, Loretta said simply. Not by begging. Not by fighting him in the street like a stray. You take it back by becoming so much yourself that the whole world has to look at you, and he has to stand in that same world and watch them do it. The word settled into Simone like the chalk line settling into fabric. Clean. Correct. A truth the body recognized. That night Simone could not sleep, but for the first time it was not grief that kept her awake. She sat at the kitchen table with a legal pad Loretta kept by the phone and she began to write. She wrote down everything she had done at Hale and Crest that had never carried her name. The spring line she rebuilt in 2021. The fragrance palette. The 3 accessory collections she had designed start to finish while Preston was traveling. The handbag silhouette that had become the brand's signature shape, the one that sold out every season, the one Preston described in interviews as having come to him in a dream. She remembered the night she had sketched it at their kitchen table. He had been asleep. She wrote it all down. The list filled 1 page, then half of another. She sat there and looked at the length of it and understood, in a way she had been avoiding for 6 years, exactly how much of herself she had given away for free. Then she wrote a single line at the top of the page and underlined it twice. Prove it. She sat with those 2 words for a long time. The house was quiet. Somewhere down the street a dog barked once and went still. She thought about all the times Preston had stood in front of a camera and said the word, I, about a thing she had made, and how she had stood in the back of the room and felt proud of him, proud to be part of it, proud to be the back office. She had been so careful for so long not to want the credit. He had trained her not to want it. She had been a good student. She was not going to be a good student anymore. In the morning she called Tara Mercer, her closest friend from college, who had spent the last 6 years becoming one of the sharpest contracts and intellectual property attorneys in New York. Tara picked up on the second ring. "I heard," Tara said. "I have been waiting for you to call. Tell me you are not still in that apartment." "I am in Charlotte," Simone said. "At my grandmother's." "Good. Now tell me what you need." Simone looked at the legal pad in front of her, the long list of work that had been taken from her one credit at a time. "I need to know," she said, "if a man can build a billion-dollar company on someone else's I and owe that person nothing." There was a pause on the line. When Tara spoke again, her voice had changed. It had the focused, hungry sound of a person who had just been handed a problem worth solving. "Send me everything," Tara said. "Every date you can remember. Every file you ever touched. Do not throw away a single email. I am going to make some calls." Simone hung up the phone. Loretta was standing in the kitchen doorway in her robe, watching her granddaughter with an expression that was very close to a smile. "There she is," Loretta said. Tara called back 4 days later, late, her voice tight with the focus she got when something interested her. "I want to manage your expectations and then I want to give you something to hold on to," Tara said. "Managing them first. You signed nothing in the divorce, so the settlement is not final, which is good. But a divorce is a small thing and the money in a divorce is a small thing. That is not where the real story is. The real story is the work, and the work is going to take time to build into something a court will respect." She paused. "Here is the part to hold on to. A man who takes credit for 6 years gets sloppy, because nobody ever questions him. He leaves the truth lying around in places he forgot about. I have seen it before. We are going to find those places. So do not let anyone tell you it is too late, and do not let that man's voice in your head tell you the work was never yours. It was yours. Now go to sleep, and tomorrow start writing down every date you can remember." Simone hung up. For the first time in weeks she slept the whole night through. Tara worked fast, the way she did everything. Within 2 weeks she had pulled the public filings, the trademark registrations, and the corporate records for Hale and Crest, and she had found something that made her call Simone at 11 at night. "You need to understand how this is going to work," Tara said. "I cannot undivorce you. The settlement is done and you signed nothing yet, which is good. But the divorce is the small fish. The big fish is the work. If you can prove you created designs that the company built its value on, and you can prove you were never properly credited or compensated as the creator, that is not a divorce issue. That is an intellectual property and unjust enrichment issue. That has teeth. And here is the part that matters. There is no expiration on the truth of who made a thing. We just have to prove it." "How do we prove it?" Simone asked. "He never put my name on anything." "That is exactly why we can win," Tara said. "Because a man who steals carefully always leaves a trail in the places he forgot to be careful. Sketches. Metadata. Emails. The dates files were created. People who were in the room. I have seen it 100 times. The thief always thinks he was the only one paying attention. Send me your old laptop." Simone still had it. A cracked silver laptop she had used at home for the first 4 years of the marriage, before Preston bought her a new one and quietly kept the old one in a drawer. She had taken it when she packed her bag. She did not fully know why at the time. She knew now. She shipped it to Tara overnight. While she waited, Simone went back to the back room and the white light and the spools of color, and she began to design again. Not for anyone. For herself. She sketched a collection in the evenings, after the wedding alterations were done, building each piece slowly. She used the colors her grandmother had taught her to trust. Deep jewel reds. Forest greens. Royal blues and rich maroons. The colors that looked like they had weight, like they meant something. She had spent 6 years inside Preston's preferred palette of beige and bone and cool gray, the colors of money pretending to have taste. She was done with them. The strange thing was how fast it came back. For 6 years she had designed through a filter, asking herself before every choice what Preston would think, whether it was too bold, whether it would draw the wrong kind of attention to a brand that prized restraint above all else. Now there was no filter. She drew what she actually saw. A coat with a sharp shoulder and a long clean line. A gown in deep red that moved like water and held its shape. A suit in royal blue, cut for a woman who walked into rooms instead of waiting to be noticed in them. She drew faster than she had drawn in years, and every piece felt like remembering a language she had pretended to forget. Loretta found the sketchbook one morning and turned the pages slowly, saying nothing, her face giving away nothing. At the last page she closed it and set it down. "This is the best work you have ever done," Loretta said. "And you did it in a back room in Charlotte, for nobody, for free. Imagine what you will do when you stop hiding." It was a small thing that changed everything next, and it happened because of a wedding. The Mercer bride, the one with the pear shape and the string bean dress, was so happy with Loretta's work that she posted photographs of the dress online and tagged the small alterations shop by name. She wrote that an old master seamstress and her granddaughter had saved her wedding. She posted a close photo of the bodice, the place where Simone had recut the line, and she wrote that it was the most beautiful detail she had ever seen. One of the people who saw that post was a stylist in Atlanta. The stylist sent it to a friend in New York. The friend in New York worked at a creative agency run by a woman named Eleanor Voss. Eleanor Voss was 64 years old and had spent 40 of those years deciding what beauty was going to look like before the rest of the world caught up. She had launched 3 magazines, discovered a generation of designers, and walked away from the industry twice, only to be pulled back each time because nothing in it moved without her. She had a reputation for 2 things. She had an eye that did not miss. And she had a particular interest in talent that the industry had thrown away. What caught Eleanor's attention was not the dress, though the dress was good. It was the second photograph in the post, the one the bride had included almost as an afterthought. It showed the granddaughter who had done the alterations, standing in the white light of the back room, looking at the camera without smiling. A tall woman with deep brown skin and a face that the camera did something strange and wonderful to. The kind of face that did not ask to be liked and was more powerful for it. Eleanor looked at that photograph for a long time. Then she did what she always did when she found something. She found out the name. The call came to the shop's landline on a Tuesday afternoon. Loretta answered, listened, and held the phone out to Simone with a look on her face that Simone could not read. "A woman in New York," Loretta said. "Says her name is Eleanor Voss. Says she would like to speak to the young woman in the photograph. Says it is not a scam and she is prepared to prove it." Simone took the phone. "This is Simone Reed." "Simone." The voice on the other end was low, precise, amused. "My name is Eleanor Voss. You will not know who I am, and that is fine, you can look me up the moment I hang up. I am calling for a simple reason. I saw your face in a photograph, and I have been doing this for 40 years, and I am almost never wrong about a face. So I am going to ask you a question, and I would like you to answer it honestly. What were you, before you ended up fixing wedding dresses in Charlotte? Because that is not where you started." Simone looked at the spools of color on the wall. She looked at her grandmother. She thought about the rooftop and the word plain and the calm in Preston's voice. "I was a designer," Simone said. "I was the eye behind a company you have definitely heard of. I just never got to put my name on it." There was a short silence on the line. When Eleanor spoke again, the amusement was gone and something sharper had taken its place. "Tell me the company," Eleanor said. Simone told her. Eleanor Voss began to laugh, quiet and delighted and a little dangerous. "Oh," she said. "Oh, this is going to be good. Simone Reed, I am going to fly you to New York. I am going to put you in front of a camera, and I am going to find out whether the world has been looking at the wrong Hale and Crest this entire time. And I suspect that it has." Simone set the phone back in its cradle. Her hands were not quite steady. Loretta was watching her from across the room, her measuring look in place. "Well," Loretta said. "Who was that?" "Someone who saw my face in a photograph," Simone said, and knew exactly what she was looking at. Loretta was quiet for a moment. Then she stood, crossed to the wall of spools, and pulled down a deep red one, the color she had been forbidden to put on her granddaughter for 6 years by a man who was not even in the room and never had been, not really. "Then you are going to New York," Loretta said, "and you are going in color. Sit down. I am going to make you something to wear that nobody at that meeting will ever forget. A woman should never walk into the start of her own life in borrowed clothes." Simone flew to New York on a ticket Eleanor Voss bought, and she did not stay in the apartment she used to share with Preston. She would never set foot in it again. Eleanor put her in a clean, bright loft the agency kept for visiting talent, with tall windows and white walls and the whole sky pouring in. Eleanor met her there the first morning. She walked a slow circle around Simone, studied her the way Loretta studied a body before cutting fabric, and then she nodded once. "Here is what is going to happen," Eleanor said. "I do not waste time and I do not flatter. You have a face that the camera loves and that men like your husband are too stupid to read. They want a face that asks for approval. Yours does not ask for anything, and that is why it will sell. But a face is only half of it. I have read about you for years without knowing your name. The Hale and Crest signature handbag. The fragrance palette. The 2021 rescue. That was you." It was not a question, but Simone answered it. "All of it." "Then we are going to do 2 things at once," Eleanor said. "We are going to make the world fall in love with your face. And we are going to get back what is yours. The first is my job. The second is going to take a different kind of person. I have one for you." The different kind of person was Dominic Hayes. He was a forensic accountant, 44, with a quiet voice and the patience of a man who had spent his career finding money that powerful people had hidden. Tara had brought him in. He sat across from Simone in a small conference room with a legal pad and a laptop and asked her to walk him through 6 years, slowly, one project at a time. "I do not need you to be angry," Dominic said. "Angry is loud and loud gets noticed. I need you to be exact. Every project you touched, I am going to follow the money it generated and the credit it earned. If you created it and someone else was paid and praised for it, that gap is a number, and a number is a thing a court understands." For 3 weeks, while Eleanor prepared the campaign, Dominic built the ledger. He found the metadata first. The signature handbag silhouette, the one Preston described in interviews as a dream he had, existed as a design file created on Simone's old home laptop 14 months before the company ever produced it. The file's creation date, its edit history, the layers of the sketch saved one over another, all of it sat in the machine like a fingerprint. Preston had bought her a new laptop and kept the old one in a drawer, never imagining it would matter. It mattered now. He found the emails next. Internal messages where Preston asked Simone, in writing, to fix the spring line before it kills us, followed weeks later by a press release crediting the spring line's turnaround to Preston's singular vision. He found the fragrance palette in a chain of messages between Simone and a chemist, with Preston copied but silent, where every color decision was hers. He worked slowly and he wrote everything down. He built a timeline that ran the length of the marriage, and on that timeline he placed 2 lines. One line was the work Simone created, with dates pulled from file metadata and email headers and calendar invitations. The other line was the public credit, the interviews and the press releases and the awards, all of it landing on Preston. The 2 lines almost never touched. She made the thing, and weeks or months later, he was praised for it. Over and over, for 6 years, the same gap. "I have done this for 20 years, Dominic said one evening, looking at the timeline on his screen. "Usually the hard part is finding the truth. People hide it well. Your husband did not hide it at all. He never thought he would have to. He thought you would always be standing behind him, handing him the work and the credit and never asking for either back. The whole system depended on you staying small. That is the only mistake a man like that ever makes. He builds his whole life on a person doing exactly one thing forever, and then one day the person stops. And he found the royalties." This was the part that made even Dominic's calm voice go quiet. Several of Simone's designs had been licensed to outside manufacturers. The licensing income flowed into an account structured under Preston's personal holding company, separate from the marriage and separate from the divorce settlement. Over 4 years, the design Simone created had generated a number that Dominic wrote on the legal pad and turned around so she could read it. Simone looked at the number for a long moment. "He told me my work did not count," she said. "He counted it very carefully," Dominic said. "He just made sure you never saw the page." While Dominic built the ledger, Eleanor built the face. She put Simone through everything. Movement coaches. A vocal coach to slow her speech and let it land. Days in front of test cameras with no makeup and harsh light, then soft light, then the bright clean light Eleanor preferred above all others, white and even, no shadows, nothing hidden. Eleanor hated a shadowed face. She said the industry used darkness to hide the truth and she had no use for it. "Most people crumble in front of a camera," Eleanor told her after the first real test. "They perform. You do not perform. You simply are, and you let the lens come to you. Do you know how rare that is? I can teach a person to walk. I can teach a person to pose. I cannot teach a person to be still inside the storm. You came with that." He had it in his house for 6 years and called it plain. There were hard days. Eleanor did not believe in easy ones. She made Simone do the same walk 40 times across a bare floor until her body learned to carry itself without thinking. She made her stand in front of a mirror and say her own name out loud, slowly, until she stopped flinching at the sound of it. She told Simone, on the 3rd day, that she walked like a woman apologizing for the space she took up, and that they were going to fix that before they fixed anything else. "You spent 6 years being told to be smaller," Eleanor said. "Your body believed it. We have to teach your body the truth now, and the body is stubborn, it holds a lie longer than the mind does. So we walk. Again." Simone walked again. And again. And slowly, over days, something in the way she held her shoulders began to change. She stopped folding inward. She started taking up the room she stood in. Eleanor watched it happen and did not praise her, because Eleanor believed praise made people stop, but she made a small note in the leather book she carried, and the note said, simply, "It is working." Simone stood in the white light in a maroon dress that fit like it had been grown on her, and she looked into the lens without asking it for anything, and the room went quiet around her in the way rooms do when something true is happening. Eleanor watched the test images come up on the monitor. She did not smile. She just looked, for a long time, and then she said the thing that Simone would carry with her for years. "The wrong Hale was on the cover this whole time," Eleanor said. "We are going to correct the record." Eleanor did not start small. She never started small. She booked Simone for a campaign with a luxury house that was not Hale and Crest, a rival, an old and respected name that had been quietly looking for a face to relaunch its flagship line. Eleanor made one phone call. She told them she had found someone, that she was not going to describe it, that they simply had to see the test images. She sent 6 photographs. The house signed Simone within 48 hours. The photographer was André Lockhart. He was 35, easy to be around, serious about the work and joyful about nothing else. He had shot some of the most talked about images of the last decade, and he had a reputation for making models look like the truest version of themselves rather than the most polished. He looked at Simone the first morning of the shoot, in the white expanse of his studio, and he set down his camera and just looked. "Eleanor told me you were the real thing," he said. "Eleanor exaggerates about everyone. She is not exaggerating about you." He picked the camera back up. "I am not going to tell you how to stand. I am going to talk to you, and you are going to listen, and the pictures will happen on their own. That is how this works when it is right." The studio was lit the way Eleanor demanded. Bright, clean, white light from every side. No dark corners. No warm glow. No shadowed cheek or hidden eye. Everything visible. Simone stood in a series of jewel-toned pieces, royal blue and deep red and forest green, her natural hair sculpted high, her face fully lit and fully open. André talked. She listened. The pictures happened. He talked about everything except the work. He talked about the diner near his apartment that had the best coffee in the city and the worst service. He talked about his mother, who had raised 4 children on a teacher's salary and still asked him every week when he was going to get a real job. He talked about light, which was the only part of the work he ever discussed directly, because he believed light was the only thing a photographer truly controlled and everything else was just paying attention. And while he talked, Simone forgot to be afraid, and her face opened, and André kept shooting. "There," he said softly, at one point, not lowering the camera. "Right there. Do not move. Do you feel that? That is you with nothing in the way. That is what he never let you be." He had not asked who he was. He did not need to. The whole crew had read the same thing in her stillness, the way you can read a healed break in the way a person holds an arm. Between setups, Eleanor sat in a chair at the edge of the studio and watched the monitor without speaking. She had seen 10,000 shoots. She had made and ended 100 careers. She watched this one with the focus of a woman who knew she was looking at something she would talk about for the rest of her life. When the campaign launched 6 weeks later, it did something that campaigns rarely do anymore. It stopped people. The flagship image went up on a building in Manhattan 4 stories tall, a woman in a red gown against a field of white, looking down at the city without asking it for a single thing. People stood on the sidewalk and looked up. The image moved across the internet on its own power, the way only a few images a year do, not because anyone paid for it to but because people could not stop looking. The rival house sold out the line in 11 days. Nobody knew her name yet. The campaign had run her as a face only, no biography, which had been Eleanor's decision. "Let them want to know," Eleanor had said. "Mystery is the only luxury that has never gone out of style." So for a few weeks, Simone was simply the woman in red, the new face, the one everyone was asking about. The questions came from every direction. Casting directors called Eleanor's agency wanting the woman in red for their own campaigns. A talk show producer asked if she would come on and talk about her overnight success, not knowing there had been nothing overnight about it, that it had taken 31 years and a marriage in a back room in Charlotte. 2 magazines ran short items guessing at who she might be. Eleanor turned all of it down, every offer, with the calm of a woman who had done this before and knew that the longer the world waited, the louder the eventual answer would be. "We do not sell the story cheap," she told Simone. "We are building toward one room, one cover, one moment when the whole thing comes together at once. Everything before that is just practice. Say no, and keep working." Preston Hale did not notice at first. He was busy. He was busy because he had a new life now, and the new life had a name, and her name was Brooke Sutton. Brooke was 28 and had built a following of several million people by photographing her own lifestyle, which was beautiful and empty in equal measure. She had met Preston at a party 2 months after the divorce, though Simone would later learn it had been closer to 2 months before. Brooke understood status the way some people understand weather. She could feel it changing in the air. Preston was the biggest status she had ever stood next to, and she had no intention of stepping away from it. She had a following of several million people, built on photographs of a life that looked perfect and meant nothing. A breakfast table by a window. A pair of shoes on a marble floor. Her own reflection in a hotel mirror in a foreign city. She had never made a single thing with her hands, and she did not see why that should matter, because the world had paid her well for a decade simply to be looked at, and she had come to believe that being looked at was itself a kind of talent, maybe the only one that counted. Preston liked how the world looked at Brooke. He liked walking into rooms with her. He liked that photographers turned when she arrived. He had told Simone he needed a woman the world wanted, and now he had one, and for a while it felt to him like proof that he had been right all along. He installed Brooke at the edge of the company, an informal role, a creative consultant, a brand ambassador. He gave her opinions weighed in meetings. The design team, who had quietly understood for years that the real eye in the building had been Preston's wife, watched Brooke walk into the studio and start moving things around, and they said nothing, because saying something was not how you kept a job at Hale and Crest. Brooke looked at the jewel tones the design team had pulled for the coming season and told them it felt heavy. She wanted lighter. She wanted bone and blush and a cool dove gray. She wanted what she called clean. She said heavy colors made a brand look like it was trying too hard, which was, though she did not know it, almost word for word the thing Preston had once said to Simone to stop her from wearing red. The team did what she said. They always did what the person standing next to Preston said. That was the whole problem, and none of them could name it out loud. Far away, in André Lockhart's studio, Simone stood in a forest green gown in the white light and let the camera come to her. The two companies were moving in opposite directions, and only one person in the world could see both at once. Eleanor came to the loft on a gray morning with 2 cups of coffee and a folder, and she put both on the table and sat down across from Simone with the look of a woman about to change someone's life. "You can model for other people for the next 10 years and make a great deal of money," Eleanor said. "Or you can do the thing you were actually built to do. You are not a face. A face is a tenant. You are the building. I want to back you. Your own label. Your name on it. Your eye in every piece. I will put up the money and the infrastructure and the relationships, and I will take a fair stake, and you will run it. I have done this 4 times and made 4 fortunes and I am too old to be wrong now. What do you say?" Simone looked at the folder. She thought about 6 years of her work wearing another man's name. "My name," she said. "Not a clever brand name. My name." "Of course your name," Eleanor said. "That is the entire point. The label was called Reed. They built it through the winter." Simone designed the first collection in 8 weeks, faster than she had ever worked, because she was not designing through a husband's preferences anymore, not softening her instincts for a man who called them plain. She used the colors she trusted. Deep jewel reds and royal blues, forest greens and rich maroons, fabrics with weight and movement. The clothes looked like they were made for women who had decided to stop apologizing. Eleanor saw the first samples and went very quiet, which from Eleanor was the highest praise that existed. 2 of Hale and Crest's best people came to Reed in those first weeks. They had reached out to Simone quietly through André, having watched the rival campaign and recognized the eye behind it the way you recognize a handwriting. They had been at Hale and Crest for years. They had watched Brooke turn the studio into a beige catalog. They came to Reed and they brought what they knew, and none of what they brought was a secret or a stolen file, only their own skill and their own exhaustion with a sinking ship. Their names were Priscilla and Wesley. Priscilla had been a senior pattern maker at Hale and Crest for 9 years and had cut more of Simone's designs than anyone alive, though she had never been allowed to say so. Wesley ran production and knew every factory and every fabric house worth knowing. They came to the small bright Reed studio on the same morning, and when Simone showed them the first collection, Priscilla looked at the deep red gown on the stand for a long moment and then put her hand over her mouth. "I always knew it was you," Priscilla said. "All those years. We all knew. We used to say it to each other in the sample room when the doors were closed. The eye is hers, we said. The eye was always hers. And then you were just gone, and the colors went gray, and the work went dead, and we knew exactly why. She lowered her hand. I have been waiting 3 years to cut for you again. Tell me where to start. Simone hired them both that afternoon. Meanwhile, Tara filed. She had spent months with Dominic turning a pile of metadata and emails and royalty statements into a single clean legal claim. The claim did not ask for the company. Simone did not want the company. The claim asked for 3 things. Formal acknowledgement that Simone Reed was the creator of specific named works, including the signature handbag silhouette. The royalties that had flowed to Preston's holding company from those works, with interest. And a public correction of the record. This last one is the one that will hurt him, Tara said. The money he can pay and never feel. The truth is the thing he cannot afford. A man who sells beauty and taste cannot survive the world finding out that the beauty and the taste belong to the wife he called ugly. That is not a lawsuit. That is the end of a story he has been telling about himself for 10 years. Dominic sat in on the final review of the filing. He had spent months turning 6 years into a clean line of evidence, and he wanted to be sure not a single date was wrong, because he knew that a man like Preston would pay lawyers to find the one loose thread and pull it. There were no loose threads. The metadata held. The emails held. The royalty trail held. Dominic closed his laptop at the end of the review and said, in his quiet way, I have built a lot of these. This one does not break. He can spend whatever he wants. The numbers are the numbers, and the dates are the dates, and you cannot pay your way out of a calendar. The papers were served at the Hale and Crest Tower on a Thursday. Simone was not there. She was in a fitting room 2 miles away, pinning a royal blue gown on a model for the first Reed presentation, her mouth full of pins, her hands sure. She did not stop working when Tara texted her that it was done. She finished the seam, stepped back, looked at the line of the dress, and moved a single pin half an inch. Then she read the message. It said, served. He has 30 days to respond. He is going to call you. Do not answer. Preston called 11 minutes later. Simone watched his name appear on her phone, the same name that had once meant her whole life. She let it ring. She set the phone face down on the fitting table and went back to the dress. The first Reed presentation happened 3 weeks later in a white room with high windows and clean light, no runway theatrics, just the clothes on real bodies moving through a bright space. Eleanor had invited exactly the right 100 people and no more. The collection moved through the room in waves of jewel color, and the room, which had seen everything and was bored by most of it, leaned forward. There were editors in that room who had sat in the front row at Hale and Crest for years and clapped politely for clothes they would never wear. There were buyers who had felt, for the last few seasons, that something had gone quietly wrong at the famous house but could not have said what. There was a woman from a department store who had built her whole career on knowing what would sell before anyone else did, and halfway through the presentation she stopped taking notes and simply watched, which the people around her recognized as the highest thing she did. At the end, Simone walked out. She had not planned to. Eleanor had told her to stay backstage, that mystery was the only luxury that never aged. But something in Simone wanted, for once, to stand in the front of the room she had built, in her own clothes, under her own name. She wore a deep red suit, structured at the shoulder, clean at the line. Her face was fully visible in the white light. She did not smile. She did not need to. The room rose to its feet. Across the city, in a studio that smelled faintly of the bone and blush palette Brooke had chosen for the season, Preston Hale read a legal complaint for the 4th time and did not understand yet how far the ground had already moved beneath him. There is a moment in the fall of a thing when the fall becomes visible to everyone except the person it is happening to. Hale and Crest reached that moment in the spring. The season Brooke had shaped went to market, and the market did not want it. The bone and the blush and the cool dove gray, the lightness she had called clean, read on the shelves and the screens as forgettable. The jewel tones that the design team had pulled the year before, the ones Brooke had killed, were exactly what the rest of the industry was moving toward, led in part by a rival campaign featuring a woman in red that everyone was still talking about, and by a new label called Reed that the right people had begun to whisper was the most exciting thing in years. Hale and Crest's spring numbers came in soft. Then the summer pre-orders came in softer. A fashion writer with a large readership published a piece asking, gently and then less gently, whether the house had lost its eye. The writer did not know how literally true the question was. Preston did what men like Preston do when the ground moves. He looked for someone to blame, and he did not look in the mirror. He blamed the design team and replaced two of its leaders, not understanding that the two best ones had already left for Reed. He blamed the market. He blamed the writer and tried to have the piece softened, which only made it travel further. He did not blame Brooke, because blaming Brooke would have meant admitting that handing creative weight to a woman chosen for how the world looked at her, rather than for what she could see, had been a catastrophic idea. He had built his entire divorce on the belief that those were the same thing. He called old contacts. He took meetings with consultants who charged a great deal of money to tell him what he wanted to hear, which was that the slump was temporary, that every house had a soft season, that the brand was strong enough to ride it out. He sat in his office on the high floor of the tower and looked at the spring numbers and the summer pre-orders and could not understand why the thing that had always worked had stopped working. He had stood in front of the cameras the same way. He had given the same kind of interviews. He had said, "I," in the same confident voice. Nothing in his own performance had changed. He genuinely could not see that the performance had never been the thing. The thing had walked out of his kitchen 3 years ago with a single suitcase, and he had held the door open for it himself. Brooke, for her part, began to feel the ground move too, and reacted the way she always had, by trying to stand next to something rising. She started showing up at events adjacent to Reed. She tried to get invited to the right rooms. She posted photographs of herself in jewel tones, the very colors she had killed at Hale and Crest, as though she had thought of them first. She also started asking questions about the woman behind Reed. Nobody at the label spoke to her, on Eleanor's standing instruction. But the industry is small, and rumors move, and one afternoon Brooke heard a name she had heard before, in a different life, at a few dinners she had attended on Preston's arm before the divorce was final. Simone. Brooke did the math. It did not take her long. She remembered the quiet woman who had stood at the edge of those early dinners, the one Preston had introduced as his wife and then talked over for the rest of the evening. She remembered thinking, at the time, that the woman did not seem like much, that it was no wonder Preston's eye had wandered. She remembered feeling, privately, a little superior to her. She sat now in the apartment she shared with Preston, in a city full of 4-story images of that same quiet woman, and the superiority curdled into something colder, the dawning understanding that she had badly misjudged which of them was the one to envy. She went to Preston that night and told him that the woman whose label was eating their lunch, the woman whose face was on the building 4 stories tall, the woman behind the lawsuit that his lawyers kept telling him was more dangerous than he wanted to believe, was his ex-wife. The one he had called plain. The one he had called ugly. The one he had described, at the anniversary party where Brooke had not yet officially existed, as the back office. Simone heard about that conversation later, secondhand, the way she heard about most things in Preston's world now. She heard that Preston had been very quiet for a long moment, and had then said a single sentence, and had refused to say anything else. The sentence was, "That is not possible." It was, by then, not only possible. It was nearly finished. Reed opened its first store that month, a clean bright space with white walls and tall windows, the clothes hung like the jewels they were colored after. The line sold faster than they could restock it. Eleanor, who had made 4 fortunes and claimed to be too old to feel things, stood in the store on opening day and put her hand on Simone's shoulder and said nothing at all, which from Eleanor meant everything. The women who came to the store were not the women who had shopped at Hale and Crest. Or rather, some of them were, but they came differently. They did not come to buy something quiet and expensive that would let them blend into a certain kind of room. They came to buy a deep green coat or a royal blue suit because they wanted to be seen, finally, after years of being taught to disappear into bone and gray. Simone watched them in the store, watched a woman in her 50s try on a maroon dress and look at herself in the mirror and go very still, the way Simone had once gone still in front of Andre's camera, and she understood that she was not only selling clothes. She was selling back to women a thing that had been taken from them, the same thing that had been taken from her. The permission to take up space. Andre shot the second Reed campaign in the same white light, Simone herself as the face this time, in a forest green gown, the founder and the eye and the body of the work all at once. Eleanor put it on the building where the rival campaign had been, the same wall, 4 stories high. A woman in green where a woman in red had been, both of them the same woman, both of them looking down at the city without asking it for anything. Preston drove past that building twice a week. He had no way to avoid it. Tara called Simone the morning the deposition notices went out. His lawyers wanted to settle quietly weeks ago, Tara said. He refused. He thought he could fight it and bury it. Now the metadata is in the record and the royalty trail is in the record, and Dominic is going to sit in a chair and explain to a room full of lawyers, in his very calm voice, exactly how much money flowed from your designs into Preston's personal account. There is no quiet version of that anymore. Preston made it loud by refusing to let it be quiet. He did this to himself. Simone listened. She was at the Reed studio, looking at fabric in the white light, a bolt of royal blue across the table. Good, she said. And she went back to the cloth. Carolyn Frost did not call people. People waited their whole careers for Carolyn Frost to call them, and most of them waited forever. She was a senior editor at Vogue, 52 years old, and she had a reputation for deciding the next phase of the decade roughly a year before the rest of the world arrived at the same conclusion. She called Eleanor Voss directly, because the two of them had known each other for 30 years and did not waste time. The woman behind Reed, Carolyn said. The one in the green on the building. I want her for a cover. Not a feature. A cover. The face and the founder and the lawsuit, all of it, the whole story. I have been watching this happen and it is the best story in fashion right now, and I want it before anyone else figures out how to tell it. Eleanor allowed herself a rare smile. I was wondering how long it would take you. Do not be smug, Eleanor, it ages you. Is she ready? She has been ready, Eleanor said, since the day a man told her she was plain. Send me the dates. The shoot happened in secret. This was deliberate. Carolyn and Eleanor agreed that the cover should land on the world all at once, with no warning, no leaks, no slow build. The lawsuit was moving toward resolution. The story had a shape now, a beginning and a middle, and the cover would be the end of one version of it and the start of another. So the shoot was closed. A small crew. A studio with the address kept quiet. Andre Lockhart behind the camera, because Simone would not do it with anyone else. They shot for 2 days in the bright white light Eleanor and Andre both loved. No shadows. No warm glow. No hidden corner of the face. Simone in jewel tones, royal blue and deep red, her natural hair sculpted into a high crown, her face fully open to the lens. She did not perform. She was still inside the storm, the way she had been the very first day in front of a test camera, and the camera came to her. On the morning of the first day, before the crew arrived, Simone stood alone in the empty studio in the white light and looked at the racks of her own clothes waiting on their hooks. 3 years earlier she had stood behind a marble column and heard a man call her plain, forgettable, ugly in the way that mattered in his world. She had believed, for one terrible night, that he might be right. She did not believe it now. She did not feel anything she would have called victory. She felt something quieter and steadier than that, the feeling of a person who has done the work and can see the shape of it at last. She picked up the red gown, the one for the cover, and ran her hand down the seam Priscilla had cut, and then she went to get ready. Carolyn Frost stood behind Andre on the second day and watched the images come up on the monitor and said, quietly, to no one in particular, there she is. That is the cover. We are done. The cover image was simple. Simone in a deep red gown against a field of white, looking straight ahead, calm and unhurried and entirely herself. The headline they chose was short. It would run in the corner in clean type. It said only, "The woman they overlooked." Carolyn Frost wrote the accompanying piece herself, which she had not done for a cover in years. She had her staff pull every public detail of the story, the divorce, the rival campaign, the rise of Reed, the settlement that was moving toward its conclusion, and she wove them into a profile that did not need to exaggerate a single thing, because the truth was already the most dramatic version available. She titled the piece with the same 4 words that ran on the cover. She told Eleanor, on the phone, that in 30 years she had never written a cover story that wrote itself so completely. "Usually I have to find the angle," Carolyn said. This time the angle walked into a back room in Charlotte and started fixing wedding dresses. All I had to do was not get in its way. While the cover was being finished, Preston tried, for the first time, to reach Simone himself. He did not call. He had learned that she would not answer. He wrote a letter, a real one, on heavy paper, and had it delivered to the Reed studio. Simone read it once, standing at the white table where she cut fabric. The letter said that he had made a mistake. It said that he had not understood, until now, what he had thrown away. It said that he saw her clearly at last, that he had been wrong about everything, that he wanted to talk, that surely the two of them, with everything they had built together, could find a way forward. It did not contain the word ugly. It did not contain the word plain. It contained, instead, a great deal about everything they had built together, as though the building had ever been shared. Simone read it once. Then she set it down on the white table and went back to work. She did not write back. She did not feel anger and she did not feel triumph. She felt the way you feel about a house you used to live in, when you drive past it and notice it is smaller than you remembered. She gave the letter to Tara, who filed it, because everything was evidence now. Brooke came in person. She arrived at the Reed store on a Saturday, dressed in jewel tones, the colors she had killed and then stolen, and she asked to speak to Simone. The staff, following Eleanor's standing instruction, told her Simone was not available. Brooke insisted. She said it was personal. She said she and Simone had things to discuss, woman to woman, that perhaps the two of them could come to an understanding, that there was no reason for any of this to be so hard. Word reached Simone in the back. She came out to the floor of her own store, in a maroon dress, and looked at the woman her husband had left her for, the woman who had killed the jewel tones and was now wearing them, the woman who wanted an understanding. "There is nothing for us to discuss," Simone said. Her voice was even. "You are not my problem and you never were. The man you chose is the one who is going to be discussed, in a courtroom, very soon. I would not stand next to him when that happens, if I were you. But that is your choice. It has nothing to do with me." She did not raise her voice. She did not insult Brooke. She simply made it clear, in the plainest possible terms, that there would be no understanding, no alliance, no shared anything, ever. Whatever Brooke had imagined she might get from Simone, a softening, a connection, a way to land somewhere safe when the ground gave way, she would not get it here. "I think you misunderstand why I came," Brooke said, and there was something almost pleading under the polish now. "I am not the enemy here. We are both women who got used by the same man. I thought you of all people would understand that." Simone looked at her for a moment. The store was quiet. A few customers had stopped pretending not to listen. "You moved into my life before it was even empty," Simone said. "You did not get used by him. You chose him, with your eyes open, because of what he was worth. That was your choice and you are welcome to it. But do not stand in my store, in the colors I made, and ask me to call us the same. We are not the same. I made something. You stood next to a man who took it. There is no version of this where you and I end up on the same side of anything." Brooke opened her mouth, found nothing in it, and left. She and Simone never spoke again. The settlement came before the deposition, in the end, because Preston's lawyers finally made him understand the thing he had refused to understand for months. The metadata was real. The royalty trail was real. Dominic Hayes was real, and calm, and prepared to explain all of it in a sworn statement that would become part of the public record. There was no version of fighting this in open court that did not end with the entire industry reading, in detail, how the celebrated taste of Preston Hale had in fact belonged to the wife he discarded. His lawyers told him to settle. For once, Preston listened. The settlement gave Simone everything Tara had asked for. Formal, written acknowledgement that Simone Reed was the sole creator of a list of named works, including the signature handbag silhouette that Preston had claimed came to him in a dream. The full amount of the diverted royalties, with interest, the number Dominic had once written on a legal pad and turned around so Simone could read it. And a public correction of the record, the term Tara had said would hurt him more than any amount of money, because money he could pay without feeling and the truth he could not. The correction was issued as a joint statement, the language negotiated down to the comma. It was dry and short and devastating. It stated that certain works long associated with Hale and Crest, including its most recognizable design, had been created by Simone Reed, and that the company acknowledged her authorship. It did not editorialize. It did not need to. The industry read between the few lines instantly, and the few lines were enough. Tara called Simone the day the statement went out. "I want you to understand what we did, because you should let yourself feel it for 1 minute before you go back to work," Tara said. "We did not beat him in a fight. We did not have to. We just made the truth a matter of record, in his own company's words, signed by his own lawyers. For 10 years that man stood on a story about himself, and we did not knock it down. We just removed the one thing holding it up, which was your silence. The story fell on its own. That is the cleanest kind of win there is, Simone. Nobody can ever appeal the truth. The story moved the way certain stories do, fast and complete." A fashion writer connected the settlement to the rival campaign to the rise of Reed to the divorce, and laid the whole thing out in a single long article that traveled around the world in a day. The headline was a question that answered itself. Who really built Hale and Crest? By the end of that week, 2 of Hale and Crest's largest retail partners had quietly paused their orders. By the end of the month, the company's board had called a meeting that Preston was not invited to lead. The investors who had backed the house for a decade had read the same article as everyone else, and they had done the same math Brooke had done months before, and they had arrived at the same answer. The taste they had funded had never been Preston's. The brand they had bet on had been built on a woman he had thrown away and then erased. And the man at the top had not only lost her, he had spent the last year refusing to settle a claim that any competent lawyer would have buried quietly, dragging the whole thing into the light through nothing but his own pride. The board did not say all of this out loud. Boards rarely do. But they said it to each other, in the careful language of people protecting their money, and the meaning was the same. Simone did not gloat. She read the coverage once, the way she read most things now, with a kind of distant attention, and then she set it aside and went back to the studio, where there was a fall collection to finish and a second store to open and a team of people who looked at her the way no one at Hale and Crest had ever looked at her, like she was the source. Reporters wanted her to comment. They wanted the wronged wife to say something sharp about the man who had called her ugly, now that the whole world knew what he had done. Simone gave them nothing. Eleanor had taught her that silence, at the right moment, was louder than any quote, and besides, she found she had no urge to talk about Preston at all. He had stopped being interesting to her somewhere around the second store opening. The reporters could write the story without her help, and they did, and the version they wrote was worse for Preston than anything she could have said, because it was simply the facts, laid end to end, with no anger to soften them. Loretta came up from Charlotte for a week. She had never been to New York before. She was 68 years old and she had spent her whole life in the same town, in the same house, sewing the same neighbors back into their own lives. Simone had offered, many times over the years, to bring her up, and Loretta had always said the city was too loud and too full of itself and she would visit when there was a reason. Now there was a reason. She arrived with one small suitcase and a hatbox, because Loretta did not travel without a hat, and she let Simone show her the bright Reed store and the four-story image on the building, and she stood on the sidewalk under her granddaughter's face and looked up for a long time without saying anything. "That is a good photograph," Loretta said finally. "Your grandfather would have cried. I am not going to, because I am made of sterner stuff, but he would have." She sat in the Reed studio in the white light, among the spools of jewel-colored thread that Simone had ordered specifically because they reminded her of the back room on Marigold Street, and she watched her granddaughter work. She did not say much. Loretta never said much. But on the last evening, as Simone pinned a forest green gown on a stand, Loretta spoke from her chair by the window. "You remember what I told you," she said. "About taking it back." "I remember." "You did it the right way," Loretta said. "You did not crawl back to that man. You did not fight that girl in the street. You did not waste 1 hour of your life on hating either one of them. You became so much yourself that the truth came out on its own, and now the whole world is looking at you and he has to stand in it and watch. That is the only revenge worth having. The kind where you barely had to look at them to do it." Simone set down her pins. She looked at her grandmother in the bright clean light. "I had good help," she said. "You had a few good people," Loretta agreed. "Most people do not even have that. But the eye was always yours, child. The eye was never his. He just stood in front of it." Tara called the next morning with the last piece. "There is something you should know before tomorrow," she said. "The Vogue cover drops at 6 a.m. They have not told anyone. It is going to be everywhere by breakfast." She paused. "I just thought you should be the one who decides how you find out. So. There it is. Tomorrow, you are the cover." Simone stood very still in the white light, holding the phone. She thought about the rooftop, 3 years gone now, and the marble column, and the calm in Preston's voice when he called her plain, forgettable, ugly in the way that mattered in his world. "Send me the time," she said. "I want to be awake when it lands." The cover dropped at 6 in the morning, and by 6:15 it was everywhere. Simone was awake. She sat at the table in the bright loft, a cup of coffee cooling in front of her, and she looked at it on her phone for a long time. A woman in a deep red gown against a field of white. Looking straight ahead. Calm. Unhurried. Entirely herself. In the corner, in clean type, 4 words. The woman they overlooked. She did not cry. She had done her crying years ago, alone, in a house on Marigold Street, and she had not needed to do it since. She looked at the cover, and she looked at the woman on it, and she understood that the woman on it was not a corrected version of who she used to be. She was simply who she had always been, finally standing in the light long enough for the world to see her. Her phone began to fill with messages. Eleanor, who wrote only, "Now they know." Andre, who sent the contact sheet from the shoot with a single line, "My best work, because of my best subject." Tara, who sent nothing but a photograph of the newsstand near her office, the cover stacked 20 deep in the window. Loretta did not text. Loretta called, and when Simone answered, her grandmother said only, "I am looking at it right now, in the front window of the drugstore on Marigold. The girl behind the counter does not even know it is you. Wait until I tell her," and then she laughed, and Simone laughed with her, and that was the whole call. Dominic sent a message too, which surprised her, because Dominic was not a man who sent messages. It said only, "The number is finally on the right page." She read it twice and understood it, and set the phone down, and looked out the tall windows at the bright morning. She thought about the woman she had been 3 years ago, packing a single suitcase in an apartment that had never really been hers, leaving the bone-colored dresses on their hangers, taking the cracked silver laptop she could not have explained wanting. That woman had not known any of this was coming. She had known only that she could not stay folded any longer. Everything that had happened since had grown from that one small refusal, the decision to stop being small, made on a kitchen floor with cold coffee in the sink. Preston saw the cover the way the rest of the world saw it. Simone never learned the exact moment, and she never asked. She heard, later, in the second-hand way she heard everything from that world now, that he had gone very quiet, and that the quiet had lasted a long time. She heard that Brooke had already left him by then, having read the ground correctly at last and stepped away from the falling thing before it landed on her. She heard that the Hale and Crest board had moved Preston out of the leadership of the company that still carried his name, and that he was now the founder of a brand that he no longer ran, with nothing left but the name on the door and the public knowledge of how he had gotten it. She did not feel triumph when she heard these things. She had stopped waiting to feel triumph a long time before. What she felt, when she let herself feel anything about Preston Hale at all, was the mild, distant surprise of a person who looks back at a house they used to live in and cannot believe how small it was, and how long they stayed. The Council of Fashion Designers held its annual awards that fall, and Reed was named the Breakthrough Label of the Year. The room that night was full of the same people who had spent 6 years looking past her. Editors who had never learned her name when she stood behind Preston. Buyers who had shaken his hand at 100 dinners while she stood quietly at his side. The industry that had accepted his story about himself without ever once asking who actually made the clothes. They were all there, and they all knew now, because the cover had told them and the settlement had confirmed it and the long article had laid it out one fact at a time. The room watched her walk in royal blue, and the watching had a different quality than it ever had before. It was not the watching of people deciding whether to approve of her. That part was over. It was the watching of people who understood they had missed something enormous, standing right in front of them, for years. Simone walked onto the stage to accept it. No man beside her, no name but her own on the screen behind her. She wore a royal blue gown that she had designed and cut herself, in the colors her grandmother taught her to trust, under the bright clean lights she had asked the production team to use, no shadows, nothing hidden. Loretta was in the second row, in a maroon dress Simone had made for her. Tara sat beside Loretta. Eleanor was 3 seats down, and Andre beside her, and Dominic at the end of the row, all of them on their feet before the announcer finished the name. Simone took the award. She looked out at the room, the same industry that had spent 6 years looking right past her while she stood behind a man who took her work and called it his dream. 3 years ago, she said, a man I trusted told me I was plain. He told me I was forgettable. He told me I was not the kind of woman the world wanted to look at, and that the things I made did not count, because his name was on them and not mine. She paused. The room was very quiet. I did not argue with him. Arguing would have taken time, and I had work to do. So I went home, and I remembered who I was before him, and I built this. My name. My eye. My colors. She held up the award. He was wrong about the things that did not count. They counted. They are the only things that ever did. Thank you. She walked off the stage. Backstage, Loretta was waiting, having slipped out of her seat to get there first, the way she always got there first. She took her granddaughter's face in both her hands, the way she had when Simone was small, and she looked at her for a long moment in the bright light. There she is, Loretta said. Simone smiled. A real one. The kind that was not for the room and not for the cameras and not for any man who had ever underestimated her. Here I am, she said. She did not take Preston back. She was never asked in any way that deserved an answer, and she would not have given one. She did not save him, and she did not ruin him, not with her own hands. She simply built a true thing under her own name, and stood in the light long enough for the world to see it, and let the rest take care of itself. In the months that followed, Reed opened 2 more stores, and Eleanor began quietly talking about a fragrance, the one part of the old world Simone had loved, the part she had built once before for a man who put his name on it. This time the name on it would be hers. Andre shot every campaign. Priscilla cut every gown. Dominic kept the books honest. Tara handled the contracts, and there were many of them now, and not one of them ever again let Simone's work leave the building without her name attached. Loretta came up from Charlotte twice a year and stayed a week each time, and she always brought a hat, and she always stood under the 4-story image on the building for a while before she came inside. It was, she thought, a very clean way to begin. END.